Sylvana was used to auditions, but nothing had ever felt this surreal. Hello, family. Welcome to Storytime Mutually. Kindly subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories. Like and share this video to your friends and loved ones. Thank you as you do so. Sit back, relax as we dive into the story. She had been struggling in Hollywood for 4 years, taking small roles in commercials, background appearances in movies, and waiting tables to survive. She dreamed of playing a lead role, a role that would finally change her life. So when a top movie director called her personally, saying she had been chosen for an exclusive billionaire-themed movie, she couldn't believe it. At first, she thought it was a joke. "No audition?" she asked, gripping her phone tightly. "I was just picked. Let's just say you were highly recommended," the director responded with a mysterious tone. Her heart pounded. Was this finally her big break? It sounded too good to be true, but she was desperate for a chance. And so she agreed. The next day, she arrived at an expensive private estate for a contract signing. Everything about it felt strange. There were no other actors, no cameras, no visible film crew. The room where she signed the contract was luxurious, with golden chandeliers, high ceilings, and velvet-covered chairs. A lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in a navy suit, sat across from her, explaining the details. "The movie is a real-life experience role," the woman said. "You will live as the billionaire's wife for 6 months, fully immersed in the role." Sylvana frowned. "So, like method acting?" "Exactly." She hesitated. It was unusual but not impossible. Hollywood had done extreme method acting roles before. The contract had a lot of pages, filled with legal jargon she didn't fully understand. But the payment? $20 million. Sylvana almost choked. "Wait," she blinked, rereading the number. "I get all this just for acting?" "Yes," the lawyer said smoothly. "But you must follow all roleplay rules. No breaking character. You will be treated as a real wife for 6 months." Sylvana swallowed hard. It was strange. But $20 million? This was her chance. She signed. The moment she signed the last page, the doors swung open. A tall, powerful-looking man walked in. His emerald-green eyes locked onto hers, sharp and unreadable. His black hair was neatly styled, and he wore a perfectly tailored suit that screamed wealth. Everything about him was commanding. The way he moved, the way he stood, the way the entire room seemed to shrink around his presence. Sylvana's breath hitched. She had seen him before. Not in person, but on Forbes magazine covers and TV interviews. This was Killian Vance, billionaire CEO, business tycoon, owner of multiple global industries. And now her husband. Her throat went dry. Was this real? Killian studied her for a moment, then smiled, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "So, you're the actress," he said in a deep, smooth voice. Sylvana forced herself to speak. "And you're the billionaire." His lips twitched. "I suppose we're both playing roles then." She laughed nervously, trying to ignore how intense his gaze was. "Well, I look forward to working with you, Mr. Vance." Killian stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "We're married now," he murmured. "Call me Killian." Sylvana's heart skipped. This was just an act, right? The next hour was a whirlwind. She was whisked away by stylists who dressed her in a stunning white wedding gown, fixed her hair, and did her makeup. She barely had time to breathe before being led into a private wedding hall. It was grand, with tall white pillars, golden decorations, and a red carpet leading to an ornate altar. Guests were seated, dozens of wealthy businessmen, high-profile celebrities, and influential figures. No cameras, no movie crew, just real people. Her hands trembled as she walked down the aisle. Was this really a movie? Then she saw Killian at the altar, watching her with that same unreadable expression. As she reached him, he leaned down slightly. "Smile," he whispered. "Everyone's watching." Sylvana forced a smile, even as her pulse raced. The priest spoke. "Killian Vance, do you take Sylvana Carter as your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do," Killian said without hesitation. Sylvana's heart pounded. The priest turned to her. Sylvana Carter, do you take Killian Vance as your lawfully wedded husband? She felt lightheaded. This was a script, right? This wasn't real. But the eyes of 100 powerful people were on her. She swallowed. I do. Killian slid a diamond ring onto her finger. So heavy, so real. You may kiss the bride. Sylvana barely had time to react before Killian leaned in. His lips brushed against hers, light but firm, as if sealing an unspoken deal. The room erupted in applause. And just like that, she was married to a billionaire. The wedding ended, and Sylvana was led into a luxurious limousine with Killian. The moment the doors closed, she turned to him, her heart pounding. So, when do we start filming? She asked. Killian didn't answer immediately. Instead, he poured himself a glass of wine, swirling it in his glass. Then, he looked at her with a slow, almost amused smirk. Sylvana, he said, voice calm but firm. There is no movie. Her breath caught. She froze. What? She whispered, her hands turning cold. Killian set down his glass. You signed a real marriage contract, he said smoothly. Not a movie contract. Sylvana's stomach dropped. Her hands shook as she grabbed the contract from her purse, flipping through the pages. And then she saw it. At the bottom of page 13, a clause written in small, almost invisible print. This contract is legally binding and recognized under international marriage laws. Sylvana's vision blurred. She looked up at Killian, panic rising in her chest. You tricked me, she whispered. Killian took a slow sip of his wine, his emerald eyes gleaming. No, he said simply. I married you. And there was no way out. Sylvana felt like screaming. Her fingers shook as she reread the contract, hoping, praying, that she had misunderstood. But there it was. A real, legal marriage. She looked up at Killian, her voice a whisper. This has to be illegal. Killian leaned back against the leather seat, completely unfazed. It's not. His voice was calm, almost bored. You signed willingly. You agreed to every term. Sylvana's breath came in short gasps. But I thought it was a movie. You made me believe. You assumed. He cut her off smoothly. And you didn't read the fine print. Her stomach twisted. He was right. She had been so excited about the opportunity that she signed without question. But still, this was insane. She grabbed her phone, fingers fumbling as she tried to call anyone. No signal. She swallowed hard and turned to Killian. Let me out of this car.
Right now.
Killian sighed, setting down his drink. Sylvana, he said, his voice calm but firm, there's nowhere to go. You are now Mrs. Vance, and whether you like it or not, you're coming home with me. She stared at him, heart hammering. No, she whispered. This isn't happening.
But it was.
The car kept moving, carrying her away from everything she knew. The limousine pulled up to a massive estate. No, a palace. Sylvana barely registered the mansion's towering pillars, the endless stretch of manicured gardens, the private lake shimmering under the moonlight. 2 guards stood by the entrance, their faces unreadable. Killian stepped out first, then turned to her. Welcome home. Sylvana's body refused to move. Her mind screamed at her to run.
But where?
She was trapped in a billionaire's world, a world where he held all the power. She had no phone signal, no car,
no one to call for help.
She was completely alone. Killian extended a hand. Come. She clenched her fists, refusing to take it. Fine, he said with a slight smirk. Suit yourself. Then, in one swift move, he bent down and lifted her into his arms. Put me down, she shrieked, kicking. He didn't flinch. Instead, he carried her through the grand entrance, past gasping maids and butlers, until they reached the grand bedroom. With zero effort, he set her down inside and locked the door. Sylvana spun around. You can't just lock me in here. Killian leaned against the door, watching her with unreadable eyes. You're my wife now, he said. This is your room. You're free to roam the estate, but you're not leaving. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. So, I'm your prisoner? Killian's lips twitched. You're my wife. And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving her alone in the golden cage. Sylvana didn't sleep that night. She paced the room, mind racing. This couldn't be real. It couldn't. But the ring on her finger said otherwise. Think, Sylvana.
Think.
She needed a way out. The next morning, she stepped out of the room. 2 bodyguards immediately flanked her. She glared at them. I just want to walk. They nodded, following her like shadows. Sylvana gritted her teeth. So much for escaping. But she wasn't giving up. At breakfast, she threw a fork at Killian. He caught it without blinking and calmly continued his meal. At lunch, she knocked over a vase, watching his reaction. He didn't even look up from his laptop. At dinner, she spilled wine on his expensive suit. Killian sighed, took off the jacket, and handed it to a maid. Done, he asked lazily. Sylvana gritted her teeth. Why wasn't he reacting? Wasn't he supposed to get mad? Yell? Show some emotion? Instead, he remained cool, untouchable, completely in control. And that infuriated her. That night, Sylvana tried one last thing. She waited until the mansion was silent, then crept downstairs toward the grand doors. But before she could touch the handle, a voice stopped her. If you leave now, you'll regret it. She froze. Killian stood at the top of the stairs, watching her with an intense expression. She turned slowly. And why is that? He descended, his emerald eyes unreadable. Because, Sylvana, he murmured, you don't know the full truth. Her breath hitched. What truth? Killian stopped in front of her, close enough that she could feel his warmth. Do you really think I married you for no reason? Sylvana's pulse raced. What do you mean? Killian leaned down slightly. You're part of something bigger than you realize. Sylvana's stomach twisted. What are you talking about? His lips curved into a slow, knowing smirk. Darling, he murmured, you're about to find out. And with those words, he turned and walked away, leaving her with more questions than answers. Sylvana couldn't sleep. Killian's words haunted her. You're part of something bigger than you realize. What did he mean? What secret was he hiding? Her mind raced with possibilities. Was he involved in something illegal? Was she just a pawn in a bigger game? One thing was clear. She had to find out the truth. The next morning, Sylvana watched Killian closely at breakfast. He was as calm as ever, sipping his coffee, reading the newspaper, completely unbothered. Sylvana, on the other hand, felt like she was sitting on burning coals. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. What did you mean last night? She asked, folding her arms. Killian didn't even look up. Be specific. She gritted her teeth. You said I was part of something bigger. What does that mean? He turned a page of his newspaper lazily. It means exactly what I said. She clenched her fists. You're doing this on purpose, aren't you? Killian finally set down his cup and looked at her. His emerald green eyes held something dark and knowing. You want the truth, Sylvana? He asked smoothly. She swallowed. Yes. His lips twitched. Then you'll have to work for it. Sylvana blinked. What? Killian leaned back in his chair. I don't give answers for free. If you want the truth, you'll have to stay here and figure it out yourself. Sylvana's stomach twisted. He was playing mind games. But she wouldn't give up that easily. Sylvana decided to watch him closely. Every move he made, every phone call, every meeting, she observed it all. But nothing seemed unusual. Until one night. It was past midnight when Sylvana woke up to soft murmurs outside her door. She crept out of bed and peeked through the crack. Killian was in the hallway, speaking in hushed tones to an older man in a suit. She couldn't hear much, but one sentence made her blood run cold. She can never know the full story. Sylvana's heart pounded. They were talking about her.
Why?
And what was this full story they were hiding? She needed to know. Sylvana decided to search his office the next day. She knew it was risky, but she had no choice. When Killian left for a meeting, she snuck inside. His office was massive, dark wooden shelves, towering books, and expensive sculptures. She went straight to his desk, pulling open drawers, searching for anything that could give her answers. Finally, she found something. a black folder with her name on it. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside were documents, pictures, and letters. Letters from her father. Sylvana's eyes widened. Her father had died years ago, or so she thought. But these letters were recent, and one of them was addressed to Killian. Take care of my daughter. She must never know the truth. Sylvana stumbled back, heart hammering. Killian had known her father? What truth was he hiding? At that moment, the door creaked open, and Killian stood there, watching her. Sylvana clutched the folder. You lied to me. Killian's expression didn't change. You shouldn't have gone through my things. She glared at him. Why do you have letters from my father? He died years ago. Killian exhaled and walked toward her. He's not dead, Sylvana. Her breath caught. What? Killian leaned against the desk. Your father made powerful enemies. To protect you, he disappeared, and he left you in my care. Sylvana felt dizzy. You're lying. Killian's eyes softened. I'm not. She shook her head. Why didn't you tell me? Killian's jaw tightened. Because he asked me not to. Sylvana staggered back. Everything she knew, everything she believed was a lie. Tears welled in her eyes. She had spent years mourning a father who was still alive. And Killian, he had been protecting her all along. She looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, she saw something different. Not just a cold billionaire. Not just a man who tricked her into marriage. But a man who had sacrificed more than she realized. And suddenly, she wasn't so sure if she hated him anymore. Sylvana sat in stunned silence. Her father was alive, and all this time, Killian had been protecting her? Her world had shattered and rebuilt itself in the span of minutes. She expected to feel anger. Anger at the lies, the secrets, the betrayal. But instead, she felt something else. Gratitude. And worse, something warmer. Something dangerous. She was starting to see Killian differently. She shook the thought away.
No.
She couldn't fall for him. Not after everything. Could she? Over the next few weeks, Sylvana's perspective changed. She still didn't trust Killian fully, but she started watching him differently. And one day, she saw something she never expected. It was raining heavily, and they were driving home from an event. Their car stopped at a red light, and Sylvana saw a homeless woman shivering by the sidewalk. Before she could say anything, Killian silently stepped out. She watched, shocked, as he removed his own coat and draped it over the woman's shoulders. Then he handed her a thick envelope, money, most likely. Go to the shelter 3 blocks away, he said gently. Tell them Killian Rutherfield sent you. They'll take care of you. The woman sobbed in gratitude. Bless you, sir. Killian simply nodded and walked back to the car, soaking wet. Sylvana's chest tightened. She had never seen him like this. So human. So selfless. Who was this man? She had always thought of him as a cold, calculating billionaire. But now, she was seeing him in a different light. And she couldn't ignore it. That night, Sylvana sat by the fireplace, replaying the moment in her head. She felt conflicted. Why did seeing that side of Killian make her heart ache? Why did it make her want him? Before she could think too much, she heard footsteps. Killian walked in, his hair still slightly damp from the rain. You've been quiet, he observed, sitting across from her. Sylvana hesitated, then said softly, You helped that woman today. Killian shrugged. It was nothing. She frowned. It wasn't nothing. He held her gaze, and for the first time, she saw something vulnerable in his eyes. I don't do it for recognition, Sylvana, he murmured. Some people just need a second chance. Her breath caught. A second chance. Just like he had given her even when she had fought him every step of the way. She swallowed hard. You're not the man I thought you were. Something flickered in his expression. Who did you think I was? Sylvana hesitated, then whispered, Someone I could never love. Killian's body stilled. For a moment, the only sound was the crackling fire. Then he stood up, walked over, and knelt in front of her. His eyes locked onto hers, intense, unwavering. Then tell me, he said in a low voice, who am I to you now? Sylvana's heart raced. She didn't have an answer. Or maybe she didn't want to say it out loud. Not yet. Days passed. Sylvana found herself drawn to Killian in a way she couldn't control. The way he carried himself. The way he protected her. The way he cared for others, even in secret. One evening, they sat on the balcony, watching the sunset. Sylvana finally gathered the courage to say it. "You're a good man, Killian." He turned to her, his green eyes filled with something unreadable. "I don't need you to think that." She smiled softly. "I don't think it. I know it." Killian exhaled, his jaw tightening. "You have no idea how long I've wanted to hear you say that." Sylvana's chest tightened. And at that moment she realized it. She had fallen for him.
Completely.
She didn't care about how their marriage started. She didn't care about the lies, the contracts, the deception. All she cared about was the man in front of her. And for the first time since this all began, she knew. She wasn't trapped anymore. She was exactly where she wanted to be. Weeks later, Sylvana found a letter on her desk. It was from her father. "If you're reading this, it means I finally found peace knowing you were safe. Killian was the only man I trusted to protect you. I hope, in time, you will understand why I did what I did. Be happy, my daughter. That's all I ever wanted for you." Tears filled Sylvana's eyes. She clutched the letter to her chest and whispered, "I understand now, Papa." She turned to find Killian standing at the doorway. He had seen the letter, and he saw the acceptance in her eyes. He didn't say anything, he just held out his hand. Sylvana took it without hesitation. They had been through secrets, lies, and unexpected twists. But in the end, she had truly married the billionaire. And this time it was real. That brings us to the end of this video. If you enjoy this video, kindly support me by sharing my videos to your friends and loved ones. And also like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more videos. Thanks for watching.